these later. I'm not making these publicly available, at least my part. If I have a guest and they're saying something really critical or important, I might make that a private YouTube video for us to watch later. I've had my assistant Seth make a couple of those in my other class this semester. I don't think I did one in here, but I might have. Okay. So I'm not going to turn you all into professional writers this semester. However, it is my goal. My goal is to turn you into a professional writer. I'm going to challenge myself. So I have a 10-part workshop that I delivered at the Ed Media Conference in New York City in June that I've been building over the past few years. In particular, this class has forced me to keep reading about writing. And my dissertation, as I said, was a writing-related dissertation. And then I did research on writing and essay writing, summary writing, writing as thinking. As Kim may remember back in the day, maybe you're not old enough, Kim, unfortunately, but the process approach to writing was pervasive across campuses. They actually would list courses. Rachel might remember this with a writing designation in the courses, right? And you would take this writing intensive and maybe get some special certificate, like a micro-credential that you took writing intensive courses. And therefore you have more communication skills. So my dissertation was based on two of the writing approaches out there, the process model by Linda Flowers and Richard Hayes or Dick Hayes from Carnegie Mellon University, and then Carl Bereiter and Marlene Scardamelia at the University of Toronto, the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. It's called OISE. The two of them they become husband and wife actually eventually. They worked on turning people from knowledge telling, just writing things down in a paper, to answer the 5-page essay requirements of whether TV is a good or bad influence on children. And they have an idea, they just plop it in, never really think about coherence. And they wanted to move that into knowledge transformation through a set of reflective prompts that the students would ask themselves and reflect on. And my dissertation kind of combined both the Flower and Hayes process model and the knowledge transformation model of Marlene Scardamelia and Carl Bereiter. And I developed critical thinking and creative thinking prompts and a keystroke mapping system that let us watch the papers unfold over time. And we could look at development of writing over time, development of writing across age groups, development of writing comparing male and female, or looking at people with special needs and so forth, and how they internalize the prompting system, kind of as a neo-Vygotskian kind of dissertation, because we looked at the computer as an intelligent other that the kids were conversing with or writing with that would pose prompts to them to reflect upon. And they would be the prompts in their zone of proximal development. If you've taken P540, you will understand some of that. There are scaffolded assistance. My Monday night class has been heavy into scaffolded assistance lately. My dissertation was really about how to create instructional scaffolds to push kids along to the next level of writing. So in here, I'm not looking at this class as simply about helping you prepare for your dissertation. I'm going to be scaffolding your writing skills and hopefully pushing you a little bit and nudging you a little bit to make you more professional in your writing approaches. Early in my career, I was not successful in publishing my writing. I was very successful in writing, but then often it would just sit there on my computer, never published. And I'd go off to the next conference and write another paper, what was, I thought, pretty good paper, but not published because I didn't structure my writing process so that I'd disseminate, I'd submit. And I didn't really understand the revisionary process where you thank the reviewers profusely and you rightfully so. They've read your work and they've commented on it. So, when you understand some of that, of the back and forth between the journal or between book editors or conference symposia coordinators or whomever, you'll learn how to interact with other people. It's not just about you writing. You can't get it published. You're just thinking about yourself and what your goals are. You have to think about the audience that is out there. And even when you have that nailed down, every editor is different, or editorial board is different. I'm on 22 editorial boards. It's too many. I was asked to be on another one today, and I just ignored it because it was a scam journal. It was not a good journal. But I'm on a tier 1 journal, and boy, we're having intense discussions, let's just say, over some of the review process. Somebody's paper was maybe could have been reviewed differently, and it's caused some of the board members to leave the board. I won't mention the journal. It's with an editor who I respect and admire and work with a lot. So I've seen some different things just in the past couple of weeks in terms of writing and people's goals for their writing, and I just anything can happen along the writing process. You just don't know. So you throw a lot of irons in the fire. Here's something coming back in. Sunmei, I need to make you a co-host. So let me try and make you co-host, Sunmei. So I've got right now 16 papers in review, which is a lot, but I've learned over time. So you're a co-host now, Sunmei. I've learned that, some take a year. So we got one, the most recent article we submitted maybe 2 weeks ago, which is kind of to the same journal. It's had some issues. It had the fastest review. I've got many that have been 8 months to a year in review, and so, the process of publishing, it can be long and arduous, but you just got to keep a positive mindset, and you just got to put a lot of things out there. I have a website. I can show you the website. That might be helpful to all of you. If I click, let's say, let's see if I can go here. Okay, so we were just there. So Rob sent us to that website, right? So if I go to my homepage, and if you go to resources off my homepage, one of the resources in my homepage is about finding jobs in the field. So if you click on jobs, there are a lot of portals on jobs. Another one of the websites is EdTech programs or IST programs that might be out there, master's and doctoral. Everyone's asking me, where can I get my degree and all this? So I've created a portal. I'm sure there's some dead links in it, but we've tried keeping it up. But the third portal I created was on journals that you could publish in from A to Z. And so the American Journal of Distance Ed, very popular journal, that transactional distance theory from Michael Moore. In fact, Michael Moore, the founder of that transactional distance theory, he founded that journal, and he's a good friend of mine. He's at Penn State. So there are different journals: the British Journal of EdTech, Tier 1, Research 1, what's called Social Science Citation Index, SSCI, the Canadian Journal of Learning Technology, as an open ed. I publish in that one. It's high quality. It's not Social Science Citation Index, but I have high respect for it, and I know the editor and so forth. Cognition Instruction, High Level Ed Psych Journal, Learning Science Journal, it's SSCI. Computer Assisted Language Learning, I had something, it might have something in review right now. It's a top tier language ed journal. My dissertation's in computers and composition early on, and you can read about our research on keystroke mapping and so forth. So all these journals, there's just tons of them. Ed Media International, another excellent journal that's been around for a long time, whereas Educational Renaissance, a teacher ed related journal, is more recent and maybe not as, it's more current topics, but not as rigorous, I guess. EDUCAUSE, there's a conference called EDUCAUSE, an organization called EDUCAUSE. It's all the IT people on college campuses that meet once or twice a year. There's also EDUCAUSE Learning Initiative for pedagogical discussions in higher education. They have a journal called Educational Review. They used to have EDUCAUSE Quarterly. There's just, can you see this, Sunmei? Can you see as I scroll through these different journals? You can see the screen up to the, going through eyes. I mean, I could comment on each one of these. The International Journal of Self-Directed Learning comes out 3 times a year. It's not tier 1, but it's very important to me because it's the research I'm doing is on self-directed learning right now. it doesn't get cited a lot, so maybe you pick a different journal. I mean, I can give you advice there. Big IST or instructional design type of journal is Journal of Applied Instructional Design, JAID. So if you're doing applied research in IST, that's a kind of journal outlet that you might want to look for. There's gobs more. There's over 100 journals that I've indexed here. The Journal of Learning for Development, if you're dealing with people in third world countries. I've published in there twice recently, once, and I like that journal, but it's not a tier 1 journal. But it's open access, and it's dealing with the developing world, right? But again, you can see all these respective journals out there, and it's really tough these days to make a decision about where to put your work and where to publish in, given all those different options. But I recommend that you go through that list just to be aware. I think I've increased my productivity output by becoming aware of what the journals are and just, exploring the different journal options than having 6 or 7 in the back of your head when the next time you finish something or write something as a potential outlet for your dissertation or pieces of your dissertation. If you're aware of the journals and then look at the editorial board, if that was something interests you, take a look. And is it the same people you're referencing in your dissertation? Are you finding anybody who you're familiar with from your readings? Over time, there's 100 journals there, and I'll swear of the ones I'm publishing in, I pretty much know the editors of 90% of those journals, and it just comes to you. It just happens over time. You learn it. So you have to explore a little bit to become familiarity and with them and build on that familiarity. Write to the journal editors with questions. Kindly write to them, right? That might be one way to get your foot in the door. When you see a symposium, when you see a call for papers, think about it. You don't have to say yes. Definitely don't say yes to anything right away. Say, at least ponder it for a little bit. Write to me and ask my opinion. Should I join this board? Should I write for this special issue? If you get something from IGI Publishing, sometimes it's a scam, sometimes they're not a scam. It's really good. IGI Publishing is out of Hershey, Pennsylvania. They publish to the libraries, and they're very expensive, and that's where they make their money. If you're writing for them, you can't buy the book where your own article's in. It costs $200. I mean, it's ridiculous. So that's a little caveat in the publishing process. It's good to do the first one, maybe the second one, but after 1 or 2 with IGI or one of these other big publishing, then go to someone else, try something else out. So I'm talking about things I wasn't planning to talk about. I hope that's okay. Just kind of little caveats on the side here, because I've got a fair bit of experience at this, and lately things have gotten out, but not all. Lately, the last 3-4 years have been somewhat successful, but not all by any means. Before I go through my writing tips, initially, do we have any comments or questions?
I have one. How are you so productive? You said you have 15 papers in review. What's the secret? Having good collaborators? I don't know, a good number of collaborators?
I have a magic wand in the closet, and I pull it out when I need to. That was my old, there actually were times when some thoughts just magically happened, and people would send me something, but I don't experience that quite as much anymore. But there was a magic wand. The magic wand has lost some power. So what I do, how do we do? So I collaborate, collaboration does help. But also you have to think about when you're going to contribute to that collaboration. If you're doing 5 different collaborative projects, you can't do them all at the same time. So you really have to divide up the days in the weeks, and which paper you're working on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, or this week and next week and the following week. So one way to stay productive is to keep in communication with your team. Make sure you have the assignments clear, which each person in the team is doing. Also do your part built based on your strengths. So, and I'm a little bit older than some of the other members of my team, or maybe quite a bit. I don't necessarily do the data analysis too much anymore. I focus more on writing the limitations and the future directions and the introductions. So, and I can reshape and all that. I'll let my team handle the data analysis, and then I get, so figure out where your piece is going to be, where you're going to contribute within the piece. That's really helpful in becoming more productive. Also creating a timeline. And then locating a timeline. Okay, I'm going to do this in the fall semester in September. I'll do this in November. I'll do this in January, kind of thing. I'll get this part of my dissertation done by. So have a goal. I think last year, by having a goal of December 31st, I had 11 teams, 2 in Singapore, 2 in Korea, 1 in China at Beijing Normal, 1 in Turkey, 3 in US, and 2 at IU. I challenged all the teams to get in something by December 31st. And then I got COVID. And I was told to move out of my office at IU and emptied the entire thing. So it wasn't easy, but 10 out of 11 teams submitted something in December. 1 team didn't, but 1 team got 2 papers in. So I got 11 things submitted, but just by having a goal. And then talking to my team and kind of coercing them, twisting arms, we got 2 papers submitted on Christmas Eve, 2 on Christmas, and 2 on New Year's Eve. It was crazy, but it was fun. I still opened gifts with everybody else. I just, during the free time, we were checking references and whatnot, we were submitting. So I made it into a game. So that's one way you can be productive. I was kind of making things a game, sort of. In 2020, I wanted 20 publications, so I made that a game. So, I've try and gamify my publication experience. It's not always successful, but at least it provides something else along the way. But again, having your team members respond, sharing articles, using Dropbox or whatever it is that you're using, Google Documents, make sure the system you're using, you're all in agreement on and you're all comfortable with, and you have passwords that work. And the passwords are important. And so celebrate those. So as Si-Hung said, if you have a goal of having 2 papers submitted by the end of the year from your dissertation, when you get the first one in, celebrate. Don't just jump to the second paper right away. Have a moment where you go to a dinner or a lunch or a brew pub or whatever it happened. After class, I'm having a dilly bar, chocolate over vanilla, and I'm going to celebrate the fact that I actually can function here tonight. That 4 o'clock in the afternoon, this 5 o'clock, 5:30, I was not functional. This class looked in doubt, So there are many things that you can do to be productive. I've only touched the surface, and during the ensuing remaining 12 weeks of this course, you're going to hear hundreds of writing related tips, and you're going to want to ask that question because you're going to want the overarching thing, not just the tips. Anyone can give a tip, but what is the structure, the macro structure, the learning environment over the top? So we'll be talking about writing environments and how to design such writing environments to help you all to be more productive. Saving things. One thing that I do, and I'll talk about this later, I create a PowerPoint slide deck with a picture of the article, the URL, the date, and anything other than the article. So at the top, I'll have the URL and the date, and then the title of the article, the authors, and the URL, and then I have a screenshot underneath it. And then when I'm giving a speech, I go back through that slide deck of 1,000 slides and think, oh, this article is really good. This one might, same thing holds for a dissertation, writing a lit review. You might save all those respective screenshots of papers that have been written and say, oh, this paper fits this part of my dissertation, and come back to it. I can cite it, I can reference it. There are other ways to keep track of articles. You can also create mega lists of articles that relate to some aspect of your dissertation, and then go back through them. Now, I'm a printer, and I don't like reading long documents on screen because I want my eyes to function as I get older. And so I print, I go through trees. Short documents, journal articles, I edit on screen. I edit a lot of papers on screen, 30, 40 page papers, but 100-page papers, it's very daunting to read the whole thing off a screen. You just never done. Whereas if you print it, you see the paper, you see it, and I might read it backwards as Rob indicated, and then you're making progress. I'll read things both ways. I'll read the beginning and then I'll go to the end and read limitations. So I go both ways. No, I'm making a lot of progress. If you're reading 100, 200 pages on a screen, you're never making progress. There's always another page coming up. So that's psychologically how to gear your mind towards things. Again, there are so many different things that you can do to become or potentially be more productive in the academia. One thing that you can do is meet people at conferences after their keynote, as I've told some of you before, and then say, thank you for that great keynote. Can I get a picture with you? And then you send them the picture after the conference and you get to know the person. You link up with LinkedIn or Facebook them and all this. And you might be invited later on. You tell them about your research and what your interest. You might be invited by that famous person to be part of their next book. So that's one thing that I've learned to do over time is connect with people. Don't be overboard. Just casual. Can we take one picture, Dr. Merrill? Oh yeah, that'd be great. David Merrill and I, we've done that many times. And so I've gotten to know him. I don't think I would have known him otherwise, because that simple little thing like that. So what other questions? That's a long-winded, but it's only like 1% of what I could have said. Kim, you're saying? What were you saying?
No, I was clearing my throat.
Okay.
I was eating a chip and listening.
Okay, you want a dilly bar too. Okay, so and any other comments before I go to some tips? So I will say in your Dropbox, many of these articles exist in there. And so you'll be able to find them by year, 2019, 20. And most of these are very short articles. So I have longer pieces in Dropbox of research articles and books and all that. But I've balanced that in this course with very practical kinds of articles from inside higher education and from the Chronicle of Higher Education. And maybe from the Washington Post, maybe something from the Guardian in the UK, some shorter articles that you can read in 5 minutes and get a lot of ideas from. I'm continuing to collect them. And so as I find them, I add them to the writing recommendation articles that I've accumulated over the past 6 years. So the first time I was asked to speak about writing was November 2016. I was at the University of Houston, and I was asked to speak to one of my former students, Dr. Mimi Lee, her class. And then I did another talk at another class, and I did another all on writing. And it says this is accumulated over time. So of this workshop I did in New York City, I'm going to give you the part of the workshop tonight and next week that I didn't get to. Parts 9 and 10. So I'm starting with the end of the workshop because it's the most relevant to you. So let me start, and I'll go back and segue back and forth in along the way. I'll share sound, but I don't think I have sound in these slides, so it really doesn't matter. Okay, and Sunmei, I want to make sure that we are recording this, Sunmei. Yeah, okay. So Meina Ju, an alum from 3 years ago, and I did this talk called the G3 of Writing and Publishing Tips, Gentle Guidelines, Great Stories, and Gigantic Scholarly Gains. Initially, it was 3 parts, then it became 5 parts, and then it became 8, now it's 10. And I'm going to go through parts 9 and 10 with you in here. And there's no one tip, no one guideline that will make you a better writer, a great writer, or whatever. But the amalgamation of all these ideas, if you let them percolate a little bit and abide by some of them, I think you'll become more conscious of your writing and hopefully a better writer along the way. Now, as Sabahat pointed out, I've been successful recently, but lucky in some ways because of the people I work with, like Meina and like a former student in Korea. The two of them have pushed me really hard. They're pushing me instead of me pushing them, and they're really expedient. They're really wonderful. So one tip is to look for P-squared people, positive and productive. Anybody can write a paper and get it out and get it published, but if they're not pleasant people to work with, you're wasting some of your life. And there's enough good people out in the world. You don't want to work with people who lie, people who take advantage of you, people, who talk about you behind your back and all those kinds of things that you have to bite your tongue. People, genuine people, and you'll find there's 7 billion people on the planet. You only need to find a couple of them to work with. It's not that hard, really. And sometimes you're working with great people and you just decide to work with others after a while. Then maybe you've done too much with one particular person or group of people and you move on to another group or another. You might edit a book with one team and you might edit another book with another team, just like you might have a different editor at the publisher based on the topic of your book. Things change and your ideas change. So I put little Snoopy snippets at the beginning of each part. And here's the world's famous author on his way to mail his latest novel to the publisher. I didn't know that they could move the mailboxes. I didn't know they could run away from me. Well, the same is true of our writing. We think that we've got it all figured out and that we're going to get it published, but there's going to be burps and hiccups along the way. It's not just that we need to finish the writing and it's automatically published. It still has to be edited. It still has to be proofed. It has to be expanded. New titles get put in. Just the writing alone is one step in the process. It's an important step, but it's not the end all and be all. So I'm going to try and find the scholarly process of writing through articles that have existed in Inside Higher Ed and the Chronicle of Higher Ed, summaries of those articles so that you can celebrate some of your success. What I'd like you to put in your chat window, I'll let you put 2 dates. When are you going to start writing your dissertation? And then when you're going to end, when do you think you're going to finish? So put S and put a date and put an F and put a date, start and end. I'm just curious, start and finish, what you think that's going to be. And I can stop this right now and read this. So it's start date of December 1st, right after quals, 4 weeks. September. Okay, this is September. Okay, ambitious. Okay, good. Rachel, we're getting started. So one thing about success in writing is getting commitments down, having goals. And so you want to set yourself up with some goals and reminders of those goals. You might post the goals on the refrigerator. You might post the goals on the garage entryway and exit. When you go out to your car or your bicycle or you're walking, you have that timeline, or you have those set of goals on the door as you exit, or on the refrigerator, or wherever it happens to be. June 30th for ending. There you go. I hope it's even before that, but we'll see, right? Sabahat, so about the same. You guys, Rachel and Sabahat, be back to back going through commencement this May 2204. Okay, so let me go back to the screen we have here earlier. And so I'm going to give you some advice for writing and some advice for finishing in your dissertation. The first is an article from Inside Higher Education by Burton M. Lewis Jr. And he has 3 things that in this article. He says you have to think bird by bird, or small bits. Bird by bird. Well, I hadn't heard that expression before, but okay, bird by bird. Writing things that you can do to start with. So, I've often told people, if you're hung up, write your limitations. You can always think about problems. Everyone always thinks about problems in their dissertations. Why don't you give limitations a start? So at least you got something on the paper. Why don't you write about future directions? Those are short pieces, only a few paragraphs in each one. They're simple things you can check off the list of having done, and then you feel good about yourself, and maybe you can go back and tackle the literature review after you've listed limitations, after future directions, after maybe even implications, after conclusions. Some people list their conclusions and start even before they collected data. That's a little bit, risky, but at least you've got something on paper, and you'll change that then, right? So also, Burton Lewis Jr. points out that you have to find your personal motivation for writing. For Zihong, it was her grandfather and her son. For Rob, it was his mother and his job and getting promoted at work. You have to find what is motivational for you. It might be volition. It might be something you can't describe fully to other people because it's really about self-respect. You're getting a degree, an additional degree that increases your self-esteem to yourself, not to other people. You might not even care about that. It's just about proving something that maybe someone had told you along the way that you couldn't do something, right? Your dissertation, according to Burton M. Lewis Jr., is about story writing. And maybe write a story about, data collection in the field for your method section. And that might loosen your brain up once you write that story or the passage about the data collection to add more academic prose about the instrumentation, about the subjects, the participants of your study. And then maybe you delete the story over time, parts of that story, so it's not really a story that you're actually reading a dissertation. You turn that prose into academic prose, right? That starter prose. Recognize that writing is writing. Don't worry about grammar, punctuation, and wording, which is what Zihong was saying. She just said free write. Free writing, the Pomodoro method, just 25 minutes of writing or a half hour of writing, even if you're just writing the acknowledgments section. That's another thing I have students do, is just write the acknowledgments. They'll feel much better. I've got, you got something, you got 100 words or 300 words from writing your thank you of your parents or of your friends. So even the table of contents can be a starting point, because that becomes a list that you build on. If you have the TOC there, you've got the title, you've got the acknowledgments, you've got the limitations, you've got the implications. Boy, my gosh, you've got almost the whole dissertation done and you still haven't collected data, maybe, or you're in the midst of collecting the data, but then it won't feel so hard and onerous in terms of finishing that. So writing is just that thought on paper that can overcome writing block. And oftentimes I will bring back starter text something that was deleted in a previous paper. So one of my tricks, Sabahat, is to save deleted text. Don't throw anything away. Don't throw anything away. Save it in a file called, I wrote the book, The World is Open. It's like 160,000 words. I wrote twice as much. We cut half the book and I saved it to write another book called The World is More Open. I got all the way to the end. I just had one chapter to finish. I didn't finish it, but I was going to make it free to the world. I had the publisher agreeing, and The World is More. Now I'm going to work on The World is Wide Open. But anyways, I had all this starter text, and I've often had papers where we've cut it back to 6,000 words, and I've saved like what I thought was the most brilliant stuff I wrote. We saved for another paper, and then I used it in the next paper, and then we end up cutting from that paper. And so the third paper, someday I'll actually use that stuff, but it's been good to have that there to overcome writer's block. That information is there. I was at a conference 20 years ago where we had people on stilts, flame eaters, contortionists, magicians, all this stuff. And they had the conferences in the early days of the web 2.0. Actually, it was during the .com era, and all these businesses got millions of dollars, but had no product to sell. And so I wrote a paper about the fact that there's no learning in e-learning because no one really had anything to sell, actually. So I wrote these anecdotes, these stories about going to Bill Clinton and seeing him speak in a session at the conference, and the audience, many parts of the audience weren't there. They didn't go. I snuck in because that was right after the 9/11 happened and people weren't traveling. And so I wrote all these great stories. They've yet to make it into an article that I published. They're great stories. They were in a book. We cut that out of the book. They're in articles I wrote. We cut it out. But just having them there. And then take breaks, he's pointing out. When you're stuck, go back and read a little bit or do some head cleaning, just do mindfulness, some meditation, think, look on I have a backyard with woods, just think outside in the woods, and take a walk in the woods and do something where you're taking a break. Revise and resubmit tips from Alexandra Gold. So Alexandra, back in 2019, had a great article. I highly recommend you download. The link is there about revising and tackling those revisions. She said there's a huge difference between superficial editing and proofing and in-depth revising. And maybe you start with the superficial, maybe you start with a couple of deep things, but most people have to, cut down the literature review, cut down the introduction, because there aren't enough words. We're limited to 6,000 words, 7,000 words, whatever it is in the article. And we get time for the dissertation. When you get to 100 pages, 120, 150, if you've got a qualitative, it could be 200, 250 or beyond. But at some point, you're going to have some quotes you're not going to include. You have to figure out which ones you want to include, and don't ramble on and on and on, like maybe I'm doing right now. Reworking and rethinking the introduction from time to time to smooth things out as your dissertation data indicates, or as your conclusions might indicate, or the implications. You might have to rework the beginning to match that up. So have a plan of action. As I said, on your refrigerator, on the garage door, or someplace in your planner. I still have a paper planner in my pocket. I've got, for every year I was at IU, and so I know what I'm going to be working on tomorrow and the next day. Others have used digital ones, and that's fine. I use digital stuff too. But have a timeline, have a timetable, have a flow chart, and then make a plan. I disagree with the stick to the plan. I totally believe in flexibility, and if you don't meet a deadline, just change the plan. Don't get overly stressed if you don't make those deadlines, because that's where you end up with writer's block. That's where you end up with procrastination, and you won't finish. Just revamp it, and then maybe abide by the next timeline or the next flow chart. So and then I agree with the next point. Do things on a small scale before the large ones. So you might, as my friend Kathy Davidson at City University of New York points out, and Kathy Davidson used to do MOOCs when she was at Duke University, so she's a pretty famous person. She's written a couple of trade books about how education is changing. She says that when she revises her papers, she starts with the very easy things, and she numbers them 1, 2, or 3. 1s are the easy things, 2s are moderate, and 3s are really hard, or vice versa, whatever it is. Start with those that are really easy. Keep those scraps of paper around. As I said, have something called saved text or unused text that you might be able to incorporate later. Maybe the committee members might say, why don't you include this? Well, you've got it written, you just didn't put it in the dissertation. Saved in your back pocket, right? Sometimes you might not be done. Sunmei might not be done with chapter 2. I just tell her, go on to chapter 3, go on to chapter 4. I think more than half of the students lately that are dissertating, they've gotten stuck. I said, why don't you write your future directions? You'll feel better about yourself. You'll accomplish something. Then you can work backwards from this a little bit. That's okay. As she said, there's nothing that's wasted, because you're thinking. Even if you don't use the text, it's changed your thinking. Writing is about reprocessing. So I've written a paper 20 some years ago about the reprocessing model of writing. I combined Scarnamilia Berider, I combined Flower and Hayes, and I created my own model. I created one model called the generative evaluative model of writing. Life is a generative evaluative process. I also created the reprocessing model of writing. I could share that with you if anyone's interested in reading them. Back when I was a deep thinker, I no longer am. Back when I was a deep thinking psychologist or educational psychologist, I try and think deep once in a while. But anyways, deleted text, just avoid hitting the delete button. You just save that text. It might have ideas for your next paper, your next section. Keep the scraps available to you. Alexandra said, I made a habit of starting with dummy documents when I revise. Any piece of the argument that's not working or that I need to cut, I copy and paste to a different document in a different folder. I don't delete. Do not delete your early work. Save it for a rainy day. I so much agree with that. That's really sound advice. You just don't know when it can help you out. Even your half-baked ideas and discarded ideas can later reemerge in another paper, in another chapter of your dissertation, and then you can refine them later. You can add to them later. You can talk to your colleagues and say, I deleted this. They might give you an idea how that might work itself in to your paper. So you might initially cut it, but not really delete. Don't ever delete. We got space on you got gigabytes of space on your computer. You're not ruining your computer by saving something, you know? In fact, all thought that you have is who you are. Your identity exists in the words that you've written, right? You don't want to delete your identity, right? So she says, if I later want ideas I like, but that either need more work or don't suit a particular project, she can maybe work on them later. And something, you know, sometimes it would be, you know, enjoyable. She says it'd be humorous. It'd be kind of fun to have a blog of all people's scraps of writing, just have the scrap writing blog. I think that's a good idea. So she says, defamiliarize yourself with your work. You won't catch the mistakes if you're too close to it. So you walk away, go jogging. I go running every day, right? I take walks with my dog. I look out into the forest. I can sit in the hot tub. This morning, first thing, my back was hurting so bad. And then ponder it. I reflect on things. I go to Lenny's for a beer or two, no more than two, unless I can get a lift home. And then, or Uber. A really good point here is number 3. Read your words or have the computer read your words. You wouldn't believe how many mistakes you'll discover by reading aloud or having a computer, a tinny voice read the words to you. Did I write that? I'm missing something there, you know? So, you know, and also she has this thing of revising and writing in different fonts. We do that sometimes, but my team often will highlight in different colors. We'll go yellow for things that maybe we delete or take away. We go red for things that definitely need to be cut from the paper. And we go green for don't touch it. So we have highlights that we use along the way. That's very, very helpful to team members to know what, you know, instead of tracking changes always, track changes okay, but sometimes it's so cluttered when you track changes. It's best to use highlights, or sometimes in the final revision, highlight in yellow all the words that you've changed. So when your colleague's reading or Dr. Bonk's reading it, I know I've already read the whole document, just not the parts in yellow, right? So that can focus me in. And try and maintain some kind of revisionary structure. Know what things you plan to cut or plan to change or plan to rewrite. And, you know, a big one for, I'd say 80% of doctoral students somewhere in their dissertation, they've written paragraphs that are 2 pages long. If you've got a paragraph that's longer than a page, double-spaced page, then it's probably going to need to be cut into 2. If you've got a sentence that's over 40 words, it's probably going to need to be cut into 2. Some sentences are okay to 60 words, but you wouldn't believe how many students give me 80-word sentences. And I'm like, you've got 3 sentences there. So brevity, conciseness, limit the grammatical the syntactic complexity. If you put your dissertation in a syntactic complexity score and you get a score above like 20, you know, and only nuns write like that. I mean, my auntie's a nun, and they did a study where the more syntactic complexity, the longer the nuns live to be. So I'm not saying you don't need to have complex sentences and syntactic. It's good to have, but reading a dissertation is really tough sledding if every sentence is over 30 words or 40 words or 50 words. So yeah, play around with that a little bit. Daniel Sakoy, he has, and this article is okay. He says, how to avoid failing your PhD. So Sabahat wants to really read this article, and Sunme wants to read this article. You know, she don't want to fail, but this is kind of general. So I won't spend too much time on Daniel's article here from 2020, but he says one is a lack of reflection on your dissertation itself. You lacked the maturity to really meta-reflect on your intentions. Also lacking coherence in the flow within. Your knowledge telling, not knowledge transforming, as writer Scardamelia. And also the third thing is doing a poor presentation, not really refining your talk, having typos. So I often will have students in Dossier 2 present their research with me, and there'll be typos in their presentation. Sometimes it's British versus American English. That's okay if you're consistent, but you wouldn't believe how many people have for different words, and that just doesn't look right, oftentimes. And I'll catch it, I'm a former accountant. I'm pretty anal. I'll catch a lot of little stuff. So try to be as clean as you can be. And then number 4, failure to make required changes. I've recently experienced that where a student didn't want to make the committee members changes, and that person ran into some difficulties, let's just say. Arguing with your committee is not going to be helpful, but standing around is okay. And stating if you've got an alternative point of view, that's okay. But if your committee member is making a substantive suggestion for changes, is willing to pass you in the dissertation if you make those substantive changes, I would probably make those substantive changes, and just move on your way and pass the dissertation. So fighting with your editor. I've also seen journal writers, researchers fight with the editor. And I've got a few funny stories. Maybe I'll save, let's just say one former student from ISD from 20 years ago cited a presentation I gave in a class because I was citing the movie Network, where the main actor in the movie says, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." So my former student, he was actually my student, he was a student, so he disagreed with the editor's comments on his paper, on his research paper, and he says, "Well, like Dr. Bonk says, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." And he says I shouldn't take it. And it had nothing to do with this, I was a humorous line I threw into a presentation in a class presentation. He got me in all sorts of trouble with the editor, who's a friend of mine. I had to clarify that. It had nothing to do with what he had to say. But you wouldn't believe what some researchers, how they respond to the editors. It's just like mind-boggling. Be nice to the editors, be nice to your committee members, You can disagree with them. Just, make most of the change. If you make 80% of the changes that the editors want, or 90%, you probably don't have to do the other 10%. Just do the 80% that you can do, and maybe that you can just say, "We disagree as a research team. This is going in our next paper, or we don't have room in this paper to fit that." That's a great, so you say, "That's a great idea. We hadn't thought of that, but we're limited to the number of words in the paper." Oftentimes that will get you out of doing a major revision that you don't want to do. There's certain things that you can say to the reviewers like that, like, we're limited in words, or we're working on the next, or it was in our last paper. And I recently had a paper where it was in our last paper or the previous. So we just referred them to the previous work, and that was okay. We got our things accepted. Lack of critical reflection, most common mistake. Doctoral students should create a reflexive approach and reflect on their methodology, their coherence, their arguments, and you all should struggle with your text, with your, it shouldn't be easy to writing a dissertation. There should be some tension, some dissonance along the way, because that's where insights come into play. And so he says, Daniel says, those who struggle with this aspect should ask their advisor to inject some analytic kinds of things. And then, coherence and flow. Students spend considerable time at the outset of the dissertation thinking about structure, both the macro structure and the entire thesis, as well as the micro level in the dissertation. It can't be haphazard. It's got to be planned out. The logical sequence of your dissertation has to be somewhat planned out. I've got examples in Dropbox of previous dissertations, dissertation proposals, dissertation prospectuses. And again, typos, grammars, all that kind of stuff, inconsistencies, just make sure you prove. Zihong had an English professor. And, even with that English professor, I was still finding things that she needed to fix and edit. So poor presentation, badly written, lack structure. These are reasons people failed their dissertations. They're not using standard English. They're using words. So avoid words like nice, good, very. That's fifth grade prose. Okay, you want to have academic prose. So don't use words if you can avoid it. Very, nice, and good. There's a few other words like that you'll recognize along the way, but watch yourself and when you read, and I'll point out, and I will suggest other words to help. And when you're quoting someone, don't say, the fourth person we interviewed in Indonesia said, and the second person in China said, and all these said, stated, mentioned, alluded to, pointed out, signaled, indicated, all these, there's dozens of words instead of said. Said's okay, a couple times. Stated is great, a couple times. There's many other words that are much more engaging. So use those other words. In fact, you could have a sheet next to you. My son looked at The World is Flat book by Thomas Friedman and looked for transitionary phrases that he used to make it a best-selling book. And he created a template for me of words that could be used for transitions. And I looked at, not just therefore and as a result and consequently and also and in addition. Those are great STEM parts of sentences, transitionary phrases, but there are better ones because everyone uses those. Thus, therefore, hence. Okay, that's fine. You can do better than that. Okay, challenge yourself to create more substantive and meaningful. Everything's and in high school, I was the person who did that in addition and also in that. Hence, I use them all the time. Okay, and so it's a problem for me too. Committee members who are fixed on pitiful sums of money where you're paid. He says, poorly written dissertations can frustrate. Can cause some dilemmas. And then the failure to make committee members suggestions. If the discussion section is confusing, change the discussion section and make it unconfusing. Run it by some people, have them read the discussion. If it's superficial, go into some depth. Listen to your committee members and what they want you to do. And now they're challenging you I challenge Rob to connect it to IST all the time. I was constantly, as Megan's question was pointing out, I was constantly asking him that question. He's constantly thinking about that kind of question. Failure to make the required changes. Why students should ask themselves these questions prior to submission. Is the work sufficiently analytical? Is it coherent? Does this read well? And has it addressed the questions that the committee wants you to address? Then an article by Danielle Marias in Grad Hacker from Inside Higher Ed in 2016. How do you maintain focus? How do you maintain, and Zihong talked about focus with the Pomodoro method and when she sits down, it's really hard for her to start. It's hard for all of us to start. It's always difficult. Well, she said free writing. Free writing, as Danielle pointed out, is a good technique, highly effective. Again, I use the word good there. Don't use it in dissertation. Avoid the word good. Say effective, splendid, wonderful, fabulous. Avoid good by all means, wherever you can. Avoid busy. Kindergarten kids are busy. You're not busy. You're engaged in the thrownness of the moment. You're doing something substantive and meaningful in life. You're not busy. If you're busy every day, you're never doing anything important. I'll just state that right now. It may be harmful to your health for the moment when you hear me say that, but in the long run, just remind yourself, if you say I'm busy when you walk by in the hallway, you talk to your colleagues, Kim, don't say I'm busy. I'm doing something important. I'm really excited about what I'm currently working on. I'm rethinking my, lesson plan for today. Avoid busy, and that will help you really think about your identity really overall. Anyways, free writing thought on paper, no grammar focus. Turn off your monitor. I always want to do a study where people turn off their monitors. Another group gets one line of text, another group gets the 24 lines. And I wanted to see which group is the most creative in their writing. I never did that study. Maybe Sunmei and I will do that study someday. Only writing produces text. my magic wand ran out of juice. It's in the closet. I pull it out once in a while. It used to work it worked quite well for a while. Now, I've got to produce that writing. It's not gonna happen unless I'm clicking away here. 5 minutes of meditation though can free up my mind. Jogging, I get so many ideas from jogging. Some people when they are in the shower, some people when they're walking in the woods, whatever. Create a goals list, a checklist. I have slips of paper all the time with things I'm thinking about, and then a checklist of what I'm going to work on next, and cross them off. I produced something. I've done something. And look for when you are productive in the day. For me, it's 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. most productive. What are the times when you're most productive in terms of writing and so forth? Write first, then reward. I'm getting my dilly bar in a few minutes. I'm speaking first, read the paper later, read the social media later, get off Facebook, get off LinkedIn, Instagram, WhatsApp, Kakao Talk in Korea, Line in Taiwan, WeChat in China, get off that, write. Refrain from email where possible. So what I do, I respond to all email in the morning and I get that cleared off. So in the afternoon, I'll get more email, but I can focus more on the paper writing and so forth. Avoid the smartphone too much. Sometimes it's needed, you need to get on, but we want to finish that writing, reserve that time, the morning time. I think Sunmei likes to write all day, morning, noon, night. She works hard all day, but she might be are you a morning person or a night person, Sunmei? Morning. I thought you were a morning. Yeah.
Morning person.
Yeah, I thought. Yeah. Who's a night person in here, by the way? Is Ben? Are you a night person? Kim's a night person.
Yeah, this is the most productive I've been past 8:30 in a long time.
I'm sorry if I'm putting you to sleep. So
no, definitely not. I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go to Q&A here in a second and have you comment on things and commit to something. Megan, did you see her night person? Or are we missing Megan?
That was Aisha.
Yes,
Oh.
I am very much a night person. I write my best probably from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. also.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay, and Aisha? Did you say you're a night person too?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We'll have a study group late at night. And this is an interesting one. I like this comment, number 9. Park on a downhill slope. What do you think she means by that, Megan? Park on a downhill slope.
I was reading that before going, I wonder what that means.
Ben, what do you think? Ben?
Well, just set yourself up for the next time you sit down to write.
Yeah. And make sure that the next time you go down to write, it's an easy transition. So you're not saving a really difficult part when you come back because you're going to procrastinate then. Save something that's doable. That hey, I'm excited. I can write my limitations tomorrow. I'll be done by noon. Can get lunch, can get a dilly bar, and I'll go great guns. And so park on a downhill slope. So you're not going to go uphill. No, you can't do that all the time. But when you can set yourself up, as Ben said, that's good. So try and do that so you maintain the momentum and confidence when you can get something done in maybe the short first chapter. Again, Burton M. Lewis Jr. has advice for writing and finishing a dissertation from January of 2020. I guess I'm done with that. So part 10, I'm going to get to next time, and let me just stop there. That's way longer than I thought we'd go tonight. As always in here. Next week, we're going to get Dr. Tom Reeds to ask Tom anything. And Tom's an expert at similar topics to me, but he knows a lot about design-based research. And he can talk to us about design-based research. In my other class, he's going to talk about authentic learning because he's an expert at authentic learning, authentic online learning. He's written 3 books with me on open education and MOOCs. Dr. Tom Reeds his Google Scholar Index is out of the atmosphere somewhere. He's done a lot of, and he's most recently working in prisons in Oklahoma, in some other states, try and get people rehabilitated and educated and transitioning back into society. We can talk to him about that too. But he's been on 100+ dissertation committees, and his doctorates from Syracuse University, but many of his degrees are Georgia. He was a University of Georgia professor, now emeritus professor. So we'll hear from him. His wife teaches qualitative methods, or did, at Georgia as well. So there are a couple of very prominent people in the field. Comments? I can't hear you for some reason. I don't know why.
I have two mute buttons just so I don't speak totally out of turn. I wanted to comment on the bird by bird reference. Anne Lamott wrote this really great book about writing, and she writes mostly fiction, but she talks about how to approach it, and it's the chunking, right? When you look at the forest, don't try to write about the forest, write bird by bird by bird. And it's really a nice meditative book about writing as well. So just to fill that in.
Sunmi, thanks for the link to the book already. We've got Sunmi's right on it, and she'll summarize after. There's the bird by bird. Wow, cool. So let's do this. Since you did provide that, did anyone else have a comment on one of the comments that they'd like to pick up on? Something that they heard that they already knew before, or it helped them? So anyone want to jump in here?
So I can comment on something. When I wrote my dissertation for my master's, I wrote it in a week. It was not something that I would ever do again. But what I did was I worked throughout the day, and then I locked myself in my office because I procrastinated so bad, and had pizza delivered to my office, and worked till about 5 o'clock in the morning, slept, and then went back to do more stuff at about 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. So it was like not a great thing, but I got it done. And my advisor said it was some of the best writing he's ever had for me, because I was under pressure. So I would never try and do that again. But one thing that I definitely have started to do now, and I guess maybe that's because of sabbatical, it's really changed how I think, is I say no. So to get things off of my plate and to try and really focus my attention, I schedule time to be able to do things. So like after this, I schedule time to grade, and it'll be the first time I've ever graded something for my students in the first 2 weeks of the semester. So that's a big accomplishment for me. And I have already said no to about 10 different things, and people have been pretty upset, but I really don't care, because I have to put myself first. They're not going to put me first. And that's just too bad. So sad.
Yeah, I agree. I'm saying no to, and I have 20 ways to say no. 10 are honest, 10 are lies. I try not to use the lies ever, but they're there as a back, and just in case I need them. I try to be honest, so I can't say I'm going to spend the summer with my mother because she passed away, but it's on the list, it's on the list if I need it. And maybe I'll go to the grave, my mom and dad's grave, and it might be honest that way too. But so okay, we got 2 connections. Anyone want to get a third connection with this tonight? Yeah, Ben?
I really like the comment about watching your language, especially like undertaking such a huge thing like a dissertation. So at work, people always ask me like, how's classes going? How's the dissertation process? And my go-to response is they're either going to kick me out or give me a degree, so I'm really going to make an effort to have a more positive spin on it.
Yeah.
So I kind of looked at it as like, just keep taking little baby steps, kind of like imagery of like drudgery, just like miserable, but I'm just going to do it. So that really stuck out to me. Just enjoy the process, be positive with your language.
Yeah. Just be thankful for your shoes and shoelaces,
Absolutely.
every day, because some people in the world do not have shoes or shoelaces, And so what do we have to complain about? As Si Hung pointed out with Apple, she's, you know, she got on through, even though she had about eyesight that she had to read real close. She could see some things, but most, you know, and there are many people in different situations that have found ways to overcome the challenges and barriers that exist in front of them, be they personal or professional or both. And so, you know, whether you have children, like Yua has a child back at home, whether Rachel has her dog that interrupts her writing at night, you know, we all have, my dog wants to play all night long. I took him out, as you saw his picture there. I literally, I can run him for an hour and a half, and we get home within 20 minutes, he'll want to run again. He's 4 years old, and he just likes to, he's a pistol. Oliver's really, yeah. So one more sharing, somebody else. We got to end tonight.
I'm just really.
Okay, we got Megan. You got two more. So Yua and Megan. Yua first, and then Megan.
Oh no, Yua, go ahead. I've spoken already, so go ahead.
Okay. I forgot the direct quote, but I remember it was like parking something on a slope. I forgot how did you word it, but
Yeah.
I like the idea of leaving something easy for the next task, and then it's easy for you to pick it up. Because sometimes when I have like tons of emails, I always found, oh, I want to tackle this thing first because it's so quick. I can do it in 5 minutes rather than the big project. I was like, just procrastinating. So I like that idea of like always leave yourself plan for the next step. So help you get started.
Right. Megan, what were you going to say?
I just I do work well under pressure, so I do tend to procrastinate, which is going to be an issue when you're writing such a large paper, when I'm writing such a large paper. So definitely all that chunking talk and, you know, setting up the goal of like, all right, I'm going to write a little bit, because you do end up writing more than you intend, right? And so, you know, all right, I'm just really making sure that I'm setting goals and really achieving them. But like you said, being open to revision, because you don't want to get stuck in that perfectionism where you're like, oh, I didn't make it. And then, oh, well, you know, so yeah, but definitely that's going to be a thing that I work on. So chunking was a big thing that resonated with me.
So in here, my goals, were stated goals from the department are to help you get EDDs get ready for quals, and both help the PhD and EDDs get ready for dissertations and dissertation proposal. But when you take a class with me, there has to be more goals than that. And so I will state that the third goal is to become better at writers and more self-aware of your writing. So this semester, you're going to get consistent. This is only one part of the 10 parts. Plus, I'm going to have Susie Gronseth and Tiffany talk about writing, and maybe some others talk about writing. So you'll hear a lot about writing through. And I hope these little increments are helpful to all of you and will build up over time. The fourth thing I want is you to meet other people besides me. So I'm bringing in guests here from time to time that you can listen to. So you have four goals. I don't just have 2 goals in this class. And I want to do one final sharing. I've got my calendar project I'm working on. I see the calendars up here. I saw it somewhere here. Okay. Can you all see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm working on a calendar project that's called Pondering on Leadership, Learning, and Life 2023. That was going to be one. That's not actually the way it's going to look, unfortunately. So maybe I don't have an example. Let me see if I do have one. Maybe next week, I guess I'll have to share a better example. Yeah, I don't have one up here. So next week I'll start with that. I'll share what we're about done with the first one. We're doing 3 calendars, 365 calendars, one on Southern Indiana parks and lakes and rivers, one on my dog Oliver in Southern Indiana, and one of IU in Bloomington. So, but that's the title, pondering on leadership, learning, and life. It's been quite a journey over 3 years of running and creating these calendars. It's nice to have some actually to look at. So I have a printer in Montana, in Livingston, Montana, called Printing for Less. So yeah, we'll see, or something like that. Well, I think Sunmei, do you have any final comments before we go?
Oh, everything is good. And actually, I really agree with Megan. That's because from my experience, it can be done at one time. So usually I made over 10 versions about one paper. And then the first time I couldn't think about the whole paper, for example, 100 pages, but just started, just like a free writing, and then gradually revise, and finally I made it from my experience. So don't be stressful, just start and then just to set the, schedule regularly and then start. Yeah, good luck. Thank you.
Next week there are articles on design-based
Thank you.
learning in the Dropbox. So I'll share Tom Reed's bio with you all. And if you could come with a question from any question about research, about your research. Oh, we were going to have Ben. We'll save Ben for next time. We're going to talk about your dissertation. So we'll have you and I think I'll have every one of you talk about some aspect of your dissertation and have Tom Reeves respond about it. So be prepared to at least say something about your dissertation to Dr. Reeves. So we would like to have you ask something of him and also have him give you something or share something with you all. He's one of the best people I know in the world. So you'll delight in hearing from Tom. I'll stop the recording at this point.